Hi, friends. Can hear you.
Hi.
Hey João, hey Norah.
Hi, guys.
Hey, João.
S- So glad to be back. The three of us, we're back. We're gonna keep on doing the studies. We're back with Paul and Stephen, this book that we love so much. We have been absent for a couple of weeks because we had a couple of issues that we had to take care of, but now we're back. We're full of hope, love, emotions to share with you guys. This book's amazing. We have a couple of interesting things to talk about today. And before we start, as always, our dear friend Norah will bring us some prayer, and then we can start properly talking about the book.
All right, dear friends. Let us close our eyes if it feels in our alignment, and if not, just tuning into this beautiful vibration, thanking the spirits this evening for this amazing opportunity to reunite and continue studying this book with precious lessons for our soul. We ask for enlightenment this evening, that this message touches us in a very special way this night, or if watching on demand. With that, we're going to say um, Hail Mary's prayer. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Mother of Mary, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen. And with that, we kindly ask permission to begin. So be it.
Beautiful. Thank you, dear, so much. So, guys, we're on chapter 7. Its title is "The Thirst Persecutions." From what we saw last study when we were here, we saw, and Nora brought that for us, Stephen being locked out in prison. All those things that had happened, we saw that his preaching bothered Saul a lot. Saul got his pride really offended, and at the end of the day, we finished last chapter with Stephen locked in prison. Saul of Tarsus, as we've seen, he's a very proud man. He was this great orator. He was this Jewish star there in Jerusalem, Nazareth. So the guy was full of pride. He was very full of himself in this part of the book. As we've seen, and the book starts this chapter bringing us these characteristics of his, and we see here that he got really touched and really offended by everything that he found in Stephen. He was carried away by the idea of revenge. He was thinking about revenging a lot. Impressed by Stephen, fearless in the face of his authority and in the face of his fame. Stephen was not afraid at all, as we've seen. In his view, the preacher of the gospel had inflicted public humiliation on him, which demanded equivalent reparations. So, this is the context in which we are. All the people who lived in Jerusalem, as we've said here, found in Saul of Tarsus, the great orator, the great preacher, the man of the year, that who he was. The intellectuals of the temple esteemed him as a vigorous personality, a sure guide, taking him for a master of superior rationalism. The most ancient priests and doctors of the Sanhedrin recognized his keen intelligence and placed their hope for the future in him. This is the man we're talking about here. This is Stephen, poor thing, enemy. So Stephen's controversies ached in the most sensitive fibers of his heart. He got really offended. Deep down, his resentment was the hallmark of an ardent and sincere youth. However, wounded vanity, racial pride, the instinct for dominance appeared on his spiritual retina. He could only think about that revenge, 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 because he was really offended. In the heart of his reflections, he now hated that Christ, and he started. And as we've seen talking about the Bible, and this story is very well known worldwide, and we know that he became Christ's most famous persecutor. He hated Stephen, of course, so much, and then he considered Stephen his this very dangerous enemy. He could not tolerate any expression of that doctrine, apparently simple, but which came to shake in the foundation of established principles. He would relentlessly pursued the man of the way in the person of all those associated with him. That was his focus. He would intentionally mobilize all the sympathies he had, and he was he was full of friends, to multiply the indispensable investigation. And then the book brings us a couple of very important information for us to understand the process. The day after Stephen's arrest, he tried to rally the first forces with the utmost skill. In search of sympathy for the broad movement of persecution that he intended to carry out, he visited the most eminent personalities of Judaism, refraining, however, from seeking the cooperation of the recognized pacifist authorities. As we've seen before, Gamaliel was full of peace, and he was beginning this very interesting friendship with Simon Peter. The inspiration of the prudent did not interest him. He needed temperaments analogous to his own, so that the commitment would not fail. The book brings a really interesting thing that I want to transcribe here. Encouraged in his intentions by the almost general approval of his plan, Saul began to coordinate the first efforts to unravel the activities of the men of the way in its smallest modalities. Obsessed with the idea of public revenge, and he really wanted to get his revenge in this public scene. He imagined sinister pictures in the overexcited mind. As soon as possible, he would arrest everyone involved. The gospel, in their eyes, concealed impending sedition. He would present Stephen oratory concepts as the passport of the revolutionary banner in order to arouse the reputation of the less vigilant comrades, used to pact with evil under the pretext of accommodative tolerance. He would combine the text of the law of Moses and the holy writings to justify the deserters from the principles of the race should be led to death. This is really, really interesting because we see this type of thing nowadays, combining verses from the Bible to say that those that do not agree with me, they are in the wrong path and that they will go to hell. This is really common nowadays. On that day, marked by the visit to the authorities in evidence that he was planning, in order to attract them to his cause, other surprising facts aggravated the concerns that overwhelmed him. This is very interesting. Two very wealthy compatriots from Jerusalem, after listening to Stephen's self-defense at the Sanhedrin, impressed by the eloquence and correctness of the speaker's concepts, distributed with their children the share of the inheritance that was due to each one, and donated to the men of the way the rest of their possessions. This was huge, and this was happening a lot. When we read the book of Acts in the Bible, we see that this was happening every day. For this, they sought out Simon Peter, kissing his hands, which had been hardened at work after hearing his word about Jesus Christ. The news echoed in Pharisaic circles with the characteristics of a true scandal. This happened. Saul of Tarsus learned of the fact the next day, gotten the general shock that Stephen's attitude had provoked. So he got even more harsh on Stephen. The defection of the two correligionist to the Galileans caused him a deep feeling of revolt. He got very mad when he learned about that. Saul ordered the rest of the two men who made the donation to the man of the way, to Simon Peter, saying that because they were Jews, they would be imprisoned until they returned to judgment. But in this meantime, Saul of Tarsus discovered that Gamaliel himself had gone to visit Simon Peter. So this Judaism and Christianity contact was beginning to exist already. And as we've seen before, Gamaliel was a very noble man. He has this very noble soul. And then he said that despite the friendship he had with Gamaliel, not even he could bring Saul out of the execution of his plans. This is the context, the first persecutions. Now I pass the word to our great friend here, Daniel.
Thanks, João. So, from now, Stephen's imprisonment unsettled all the apostles in the house of the way, and everybody, especially Peter, who established a deep, effective friendship and with Stephen, and lost an important worker of the way. As they were troubled, also many discussions popped up, like James, son of Alphaeus, who had a great displeasure about Stephen's bold argumentation against Saul with powerful people of the Sanhedrin. So he blamed that attitude of Stephen in that occasion. As for Peter, he defended that the gospel's freedom was revealed in that occasion. So he thought, no, our brother, he seized the opportunity to show as to as much people as he could what is the gospel about. Some pardon me, some others like Simon and James, son of Zebedee, claimed that the message from Jesus should be above everything else. So they shouldn't even be discussing about the imprisonment of Stephen, or what he was he right or wrong. In that climb, in that situation, well, the message of Jesus was about resurrection, and all kinds of unfortunate people would gaze with eyes wide open whenever the message about resurrection was given, because then they would understand that their harsh lives were not all there was. So I'll make a small pause here to comment about this. Resurrection, at least this is the word that came to us after so many translations of the Bible. We, in this doctrine of Spiritism, we use the word reincarnation applied by uh, Allan Kardec after his many studies and messages he compiled in the Book of the Spirits. This word we can consider more precise. So reincarnation uh, gave this perspective to people in pain, in deep suffering, a glimpse of a better world, of a greater justice, a new perspective over God Himself. So it's, imagine you are uh, 2,000 years ago. The were so harsh, um, so many unjust laws, more than nowadays, and they had this tiny glimpse and so wonderful of a great window that they could see a greater life unfolding before their eyes. It's I think this is the major reason, the main reason why the gospel uh, thrived among suffering people, the unfortunate ones. So understanding that Gamaliel practically saved Stephen from immediate stoning, all the friends of the Way's church voted for John to go invite the old rabbi to visit those humble installations, who gladly accepted and went there to be received by Simon Peter. So Gamaliel went to know the Church of the Way in person. And what did he see there? In this opportunity, Gamaliel got a copy of Matthew's annotations and went with Simon Peter towards a debilitated man called Simonius, who seemed to recognize Gamaliel. And Gamaliel got shocked to see his friend in that situation. And he heard from Simonius himself that as soon as he was denounced a leper, his whole family abandoned him and required, under the aegis of the law, to take all the possessions and money from him. And I found this interesting. He was denounced a leper. He was not diagnosed. He was denounced. So um, in Leviticus chapters 13 and 14, regulations about defiling skin and skin disease, there is the whole procedure that the rabbis should follow to know if the patient is clean or unclean about defiling skin disease. So Simonius fled in that after being denounced the leper. Simonius fled Caesarea because he would be sentenced to die in the unclean valley. He fled Caesarea, the city he was living before, on foot and found the Galilean apostles after a ride offered by a cart driver. So he was already so weak, and he was a wealthy man, not used to big, uh, to major physical efforts. And he was traveling on foot, sick and troubled. He couldn't walk much more than that. So he found this cart driver with a good heart that took him to the Church of the Way. Steve Gamaliel witnessed great suffering and unfortunate in many ways that day, walking around the house with Simon Peter. Meeting a friend condemned to the unclean valley made him think about so many people he himself declared unclean, and how Judaism had forsaken so much about love and compassion, and how Jesus' message taught people to be brotherly indistinctly. So this is such a special moment when he this is an important man. He's an authority of the Sanhedrin. He knows all about the law, but he forgot this simple and basic rule, which is love and compassion. And he could see and feel in that place of suffering and so many people crying, uh, in different ways, being unfortunate, and he felt that deep inside him. And he saw his friend who was condemned to the unclean valley, and this is interesting. It applies nowadays to every one of us. When we see somebody being condemned to something or suffering some consequence, probably our hearts won't be touched because we don't feel that person as a close one. But when it's about somebody we know, or even more especially somebody we love, our hearts is touched, and we think about the justice of our world, of our laws. Yes, and this is the situation Gamaliel was in. Illness became to his eyes now a counselor, which could teach how the difference can disappear, and only love would prevail in its presence, and the body is nothing but a mere tonic. So I'll call back again this reincarnation theme. Well, as we change clothes, we change bodies in a figurative way. Uh, why is reincarnation so special? There is even a music in Brazil that says reincarnation is a matter of justice. So this is how God set our lives straight. You know, that this is how we mend what we broke. This is how we set right what we have wronged. In many experiences we have to live. Because if it's not like this, let's imagine, there's no reincarnation. You have to born in a new body, not remembering anything about your creation, not knowing anything about anything in the world. And so you have to reach perfection until the day you die. And it might happen when you're 5 years old, when you're 15, when you're 60, or when you're 100 years old, or you may even not uh, come out of your mother's womb alive. So, reincarnation is the mechanism of divine justice that makes all of us equal. We all have to set things straight, everything we have done in the past. Everything about the garment loses importance as the spiritual concern seize our attention. And this part of the book, this very phrase is interesting because it compares the body with the garment. And if you think about spiritual concerns, what we are wearing, the clothes, the garments we are wearing in some occasion, doesn't matter at all. It's just an occasion. It's how can we say it's one-time experience. It's going to pass, and we will have many others in the sequence. In the sequence. So spiritual concerns seize all of our attention, and our body becomes, like they said, a mere tunic. When Gamaliel started to reflect about his fortune of being healthy, decided by his relatives and in possession of his goods, Simonius wisely added, "For now you don't need a savior." That is why the Christ stated that he had come to the sick and the afflicted. This is so. this is so wise, right? Um, Gamaliel was such an experienced doctor of the law, and he was having this kind of an epiphany in that house, and uh, thinking about how fortunate he is. Simonius gives this lesson: you don't need a savior right now, so this is why you don't think about Christ. You don't feel the need to seek for him. And in reading about this, I thought we only think twice when we are in trouble. We only remember the value of simple things when we lose them. And we only remember God or Jesus when we are in pain. So, and this is all these lessons from so many years ago is still actual, is still working for all of us nowadays. Kind of sad, I think. And Nora, give the word to you, dear.
No, it was absolutely beautiful. Loved all the comments from João and Daniel. And I have to say that the third part, we continue with Gamaliel and just his presence, as you said, Jean, as such a noble soul, and how he continues. Unfortunately, I had some slides because I'm a very visual person, and for some reason, technology today. But we'll go ahead and share quickly. I know we're running out of time here, but the Gamaliel's okay, so we start this part with Gamaliel's last impressions after talking to Simonius, and it was interesting how he says his farewell very discreetly. There was a part of him that was a little bit conflicted, like I'm the man of the law, but yet he was feeling something inside. So that was a very interesting thing to think about. Especially today, a lot of people think, I'm educated, I believe in science, and yet I cannot have spirituality. And I think, Gamaliel was kind of like this character, that Emmanuel puts it for us, and the way he just describes it is just a way, just food for thought for us to think about. It's okay. And I know there's a YouTube channel. It's the Science Festival channel. It's called Science Channel, and it's a panel of a lot of scientists, and they have had several of them and talk about how they feel very comfortable having believing in God and also having that side of themselves. So that's a beautiful moment there, that interaction between Gamaliel and Simonius. And then again, Gamaliel was saying there's something that we need to do to mitigate this violence. Then after that, we come back to Saul, and he starts his the imprisonments. He begins with Hosea Mark and Samuel Nathan, and this was really just to make a point, like, hey, he was on an ego trip. I can do this just to show people what he could do, right? But that wasn't good enough for him, right? It didn't fill him up, because in the end, it's almost this thing. It's not about you can conquer everything. It's that feeling inside of ourselves, right? That emptiness, that void, that no matter what. So it wasn't enough for him. He had to go to the way. So when he goes to the way, he has a mission, which was to get all the leaders of the way to try to break it down. And it was interesting. Okay, so let's start with the first one. The first person, Simon Peter, is the one that opens the door. He answers it. You're under arrest. He doesn't say anything. He just stays quiet. But then Saul says something about Jesus and the disciples, and then boom, he's like, mm-mm. And he spoke up. And that's super important. He was very cordial and spiritual about it. And that gives us hints for us that it's okay for us to stand up for ourselves, especially our beliefs, right? To know who we are, because he had that conviction, right? That's Peter. The second person that they were imprisoned was John, the son of Zebedee. He was at the infirmary. He was very, very peaceful. I think he was the one that was the most, that said the least, was described the least. But that moment when they shackled him up, he says, I give myself to Christ. That's it. He was like, I surrender all, like that song. He surrendered himself to that moment, and everything around him was beautiful. Then he's like, let's go look for Philip and James. So then he finds Philip. And again, they shackled him up, and Philip was with the daughters, and the daughters were crying. And Philip had the strength to encourage the daughters, have faith, don't worry. But where's James, right? Everybody's looking for James. Where is James? So finally they find James. And James was not like the other guys. He was doing something very unique. He was on his knees with the law of Moses, right? The scroll in front of him. And of course, Saul was like, oh my gosh, what is this? Wait a minute, wait a minute. Aren't you one of them? What are you doing with the law of Moses, right? And Emmanuel describes James like, yeah, he's sharp. He's very sharp with his words. He says, "Sir, I have never forgotten the law of our fathers. My grandfathers taught me, etc." Right? And so Saul does not know how to respond to that. Like, wait a minute. And then he says, "Well, you're not supposed to be doing this, right? How could you mix with both groups?" And then James responds, "I did not realize that the law says we cannot have friends." Right? And then finally, he says the law is the first divine revelation. Okay, so this again, real quickly, it shows full immersion here, right? Because James was not arrested, he couldn't, he couldn't. And Emmanuel describes in the way he responds, he was very, very spiritual, cordial as well, but he was not also one to say it was okay to read Moses, right? And my the point that we're inspired to talk about here is even ourselves, like it's okay that we're spiritists and maybe something else. It's okay to go beyond. That's kind of like the way I saw it. Maybe other people may see it differently, but we think about the way Emmanuel describes him, like he was smart. Like that means that he was well rounded. He was able to get discernment from not just what he learned from Jesus, but what from his past, right? And then he was adding more. And I think it's a very beautiful lesson for us through James that it's okay. And I know there was a program we did in Cardiac Radio. I can't remember the title. I'm sorry, friends, but it was a little bit about it's okay to be okay with our past, right? Like if we were religious and we continue to be, and now we're here, looking at spiritism, there's absolutely, it's very beautiful. Again, that's my view. Some people might not see it that way, and that's okay as well. But I always think the more the merrier, more knowledge. I think it becomes very beautiful. It helps us to grow, it helps us to do so many things because like James ended up staying, right? And in the end it was like who's going to stay here at the way. And he was inspired by the mentors to respond as such. So as both brothers João and Daniel have been describing him, he was described as a future rabbi. Just there it is, Emmanuel throwing it in there for us. That's called foreshadowing, for those of you that love the literary devices. So that means something's coming up, and you can see that because he was very shocked. He uses a lot of derogatory language. Okay, and what was interesting was that when he was yelling at all of them, you guys have such absurd rationalizations. I'm like, that's an oxymoron because how can you tell these? Everywhere has been so peaceful, and yet you're telling them that they're not rational, that they're absurd, and you're the one that's coming in and doing all that. And it's like a projection, right? Sometimes we project our feelings, our things. So we know that in him, he was still working that inner self. Look at everybody else. Everybody was peaceful because inside of themselves, they were in that very peaceful state, right? And then well, he did respect the law, which was important. We got to give him some credit, right? There was, again, we're not all perfect. And even though Saul was like this, there were parts of him that were very important. That part of him respecting the law and he let go of James, that's a very important thing for what's to come. It helps him, it builds him up. I think Emmanuel keeps repeating that in a lot of the chapters here. And finally, it was interesting. He was very condescending with those that were sick, but he was also afraid because he would be like, "Get away from me!" Right? But there was we start we the part that we will end for today ends with Simonius, who had leprosy, as Daniel told us, and he was not afraid to stand up and speak up in front of Saul, right? And so he gets afraid. So going back to Saul, Saul gets afraid of Simonius, right? Because he realizes that he has that skin condition. So um, that's Saul. Let's finish up with what Simonius said, though. He says to Saul, "To you I am unclean, but to Simon Peter I am a brother. You arrest the good and free the bad. Where's your justice? Do you believe only in the God of armies? Is it crucial for you to know that if the Eternal One is the supreme factor of order, the gospel teaches us to find in his providence the love of a father," right? Saying, "You come here and you're destroying, but these guys are good. Look, they were the only ones that took me in, right?" And at the end, Simonius got very like upset and says, "If you deny her, please remember we are lepers. We're going to poison your well, and you're going to pay for it with your health and all of that, right?" And of course, that's what we know. Saul just kind of steps back, it's like, "Whoa!" And it was very, very interesting. I think in this part, it was really every character's like part, like each the disciples were important, other reactions, right? Um, Definitely Saul and Simonius and Gamaliel, they just had such a powerful part. And if we were in a classroom, I would literally give us a paper and be like, who can we identify? What are some of the things that we would react in line, right? Bringing this course back to today. Like, what would we do? Like, I'm just like, I love James, his reaction, but um, I don't know if I could like handle under stress like that. We can imagine putting ourselves in their shoes to stay calm. And yet James was able to do that. Like he was something else. But of course, all of them are very special and they're part of in the way. So there it is.
This part that Nora brought for us, this reading the law on his knees vibe, this is really, really important for what's to come in this book. Because James will be for the church this Judaism perspective, this Jewish arm in the church, and because of him, they will be able to talk with the authorities. So it's really, really important. And I'm not gonna give spoilers here, but we'll we will see that there will be two parts. This more inclined to Judaism and one more inclined to Christianity. And James will be every time in the book walking in this Jewish perspective. And it's really interesting because a couple of people here in Brazil asked Chico Xavier himself about this situation and what he thought about that. James, Simon Peter, and a very interesting thing is that Chico also said that for him, the most impressive character was Simon Peter because he was being able to, how can we say, to balance this Jewish perspective with Christianity. And we're going to see that this will be very important as the story goes on. Also, I would like to comment about what Daniel brought for us about reincarnation. When we are studying the gospel and when we are reading the gospel, we see loads of reincarnation ideas there. When Jesus tell them, "Who do you think I am?" and then they start talking, "Oh, you are one of the prophets. You are there. You are there." There in this type of dialogue, we see that they are clearly talking about reincarnation and not about resurrection. But as Daniel brought us all the translating processes that the Bible went through over these years, of course, they changed a lot, and there is this power issue. Whoever holds the money holds the power and dictates where the Bible will be and what the Bible will say. And we've seen this with the Catholic Church over the years. Another very interesting perspective that Daniel brought was relating reincarnation with the justice, and it would be really hard for us that have this more complex and of course we respect all religions, but we as spiritists, of course, we like to have this more complex dialogue to reach a point where we can feel comfortable and talk about the Bible in this more honest for us perspective. For us, it would be really hard to conceive a loving, good, just father without the idea of reincarnation. How could we think of those kids that are born in Africa, don't have anything to eat, don't have water, don't have medicine, and those kids that are born in, for example, Europe, have everything, and they're both have only one life? How can we conceive that and conceive justice in this type of context? It would be really harsh. So reincarnation really brings us hope and this belief that justice will be done every single time, over and over and over again. We have reached the agreement time here. Do you guys want to say something before we finish? So before you guys say, we have agreed that for a couple of weeks we're doing a little shorter programs. So 40 to 50 minutes, and but a couple of weeks that will come, and then we can go back to normal. We're all having a little of time in trouble, so for these days we're getting a little short with the programs. Do you guys want to say something else before we finish here?
I do want to clarify a little bit about, since you brought James back again, and that beautiful message that Chico said, right? Because in the end, it's really about the message of Jesus, having that Jesus inside of us, and whatever aligns to us. Obviously, I'm a spiritist, but still, it's just beautiful. I read other stuff too. Here in the United States, we have lots and lots of books that also have beautiful messages. We've talked about Dr. Joe Dispenza and the other study. There's other people too, Wayne Dyer, Louis Hay. There are other beautiful authors here that already have a beautiful message. So it's not like that. I just wanted to clarify on that. I am getting like a little tired, so sometimes I'm like, what did I say? So I just wanted to ensure that because we are a spiritist channel, so to ensure that that is the main thing. But it's okay if we know that on Saturdays Dr. Anceloni also brings programs. She brings a bunch of authors that just they enhance our study, and it just makes it so beautiful. I just, yeah, but this whole part was absolutely, it's beautiful. It was so sad, but yet it's beautiful. I don't know. It's the book. I don't know what Daniel thinks.
Bro, do you wanna say something? But just before you start, admitting that spiritism can be walking together with other perspectives is actually all spiritism is about. So we're 100% on the same boat.
Beautiful.
This is right. And well, I would just like to say that I got really impressed by Samonius. Samonius was, I kind of admired him because he was a regular man, not that smart like these guys. Their fantastic argumentations and testimonies in life they gave. Well, Samanius experienced um, spiritual growth through pain, and I really admire that because this is he didn't want to get into this. And when you study reincarnation, you know that you understand that there's that you a program that you have to be through in that life you have. And of course, and this is positive that this leprosy he had was programmed and was just and attended to divine justice in everything he suffered, not only the physical disease, but the broken heart, which is the most profound, the most hard to mend trouble. So yeah, I admire that man, that character of the book. He's amazing. I saw him and I thought this is who I'd like to be uh, in real life. You know, these other guys are so big and so admirable, but Samanias is I could reach with some mindset and some work in my days. I could reach that guy. Love that chapter. So nice to study and so nice to be back again.
Yes, this is great. Again, talking about reincarnation, we do need to think that there is this huge amount of hope and great days waiting for all of us. And when we're going through those dark days, those difficult times in our lives, we need to think about reincarnation, this reincarnating process, this program, as Daniel put here, and think that a couple of times we're like begging to go through those difficult moments when we were planning our reincarnation, or when we were thinking, when we were in spirituality, when it comes to I'm going to be there a couple of years. So I want to go through a couple of things to evolve my spirit, to purify, to get better. And so we need to have this very clear hope that great days are coming. Everything will be better. There's no painful situation that will last forever. Everything will be just fine. So, do you guys want to say something before we finish? Before we close?
Just thank you, and it's good to be back.
Thank you guys so much. I thank you both, my friends. I have been learning a lot with you. I thank everybody that is here with us, everybody that is accompanying the study on demand. You guys are great. Thank you so much. I'm very grateful and happy as well to be back. Thank you guys so much. We're going to be here next week. So see you guys next week. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. See ya.